Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At issue tonight, the 2017 legislative session is underway. State lawmakers are back at work at the Capitol. They will dive into a list of important issues, including education, infrastructure, the state budget, and taxes. We asked some of them what their top issues are this year.
Well, I think the top issues for all of us is going to be dealing with education. I'd like to see some campaign finance reform done. I was talking to several folks that they want to see a new trooper school that's being pushed. There's going to be just different legislation that's going to be filed throughout the deal, but it all comes back down to the budget crisis that we're in on how do we make sure that the money gets to the places that it needs to go.
I'm going to be looking at pushing for ways that we can put more money into child care in Mississippi. We have a number of parents, single mothers, that would be able to work and do more for the economy if they could actually get quality child care. And quality child care would also help the children and make sure that we're having kids that are on the right path once they get to elementary school.
Well, my top priorities are three or fourfold. Number one, we need to get a conversation going about infrastructure, how we can address that. A lot will depend on what happens in Washington. We know that because that's been one of the initiatives of the president-elect to talk about infrastructure. We don't know what the feds might be able to do, what the state will need to do, so forth, but that's certainly a priority. Our educational system is K or pre-K through IHL. We need to work on our educational system, make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do, take any recommendations and work with those recommendations, trying to make sure we provide the highest quality educational experience we can, pre-K through IHL, and follow that with some tweaking legislation that we need to do as far as maybe tweak here and there on some bills that we passed last year that didn't work out exactly like we thought, to fix some errors and issues that we need to fix. But those are the three big ones.
We also asked Governor Gov Bryant what his thoughts are on the session. He first addresses government spending and budget cuts.
Well, I think people need to realize that the budget is the primary responsibility of the legislature. So we're looking at the budget. We'll spend roughly $300 million more this session than we did my first session in 2012 as governor. So the idea that somehow these draconian cuts that have been made is just nonsense. That $300 million increase is about 3.5% above the rate of inflation. And so more money is being spent on government than ever before. We need to sort of pump the brakes on that and realize that that type of spending cannot continue. But we need, of course, to continue to provide adequate services like law enforcement, funding education at the highest level than ever before. And you'll see additional, I think, work this year on how we go about consolidating some state agencies to be able to save money and add more efficiency to state government.
MPB's Paul Boger sat down with Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves before the session started. Reeves discusses education, infrastructure, campaign finance reform, and tax policy.
Well, I'll tell you that anyone that says that our tax cut package last year, which by the way was the largest tax cut in Mississippi history, have anything to do with our current revenue streams, they simply don't know what the bill says because it's not even implemented even the first year until 2018. And so our current revenue challenges are really derived from individual income tax receipts being below expectations as well as sales taxes being slightly below expectations. And so as I look at what we're trying to accomplish in terms of tax policy, we're trying to make Mississippi the most attractive place in America to invest capital and create jobs. And we are focused on growing our economy, not on growing the size of our government. And so that's why you see at the same time that we're talking about making our tax policy simpler and more fair and flatter, and one that encourages economic development, we're at the same time talking about savings in state government. These two things go hand in hand, and it's something that we're going to continue to work towards because we've got a long way to go. We had a great tax working group this off season in which we did bring in the Tax Foundation. They really reaffirmed that our approach is the right approach as we are trying to get a tax policy that encourages capital investment in Mississippi, and we've got more work to do, but we're really making progress as it relates to that.
In that same vein, are you or other Republicans going to recommend another round of tax cuts this year or another push for further streamlining the state's tax structure?
Well, we certainly saw a couple things that we can improve upon during our tax study. Things like the marriage penalty. There's a disagreement between the Tax Foundation and the Department of Revenue as to whether or not we have a marriage penalty in Mississippi. Our DOR says we do not. But I think part of that is just confusion about the way in which the tax code is written in Mississippi. And so I think what you'll see is an effort to do some things, small things like that, to again continue to move us forward. But I think we find ourselves today in a position where our tax code is in pretty good shape in trying to help us accomplish our goals.
Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about education. The big thing I know pretty much everybody's looking for is the recommendation from EdBuild about how to address the state's education funding formula. At this point, there hasn't been a recommendation made as of yet, but what kind of recommendation would you like to see?
Well, I think what you'll see EdBuild propose is a formula that is more student-centered, that focuses on specific student needs. I think you'll see, for instance, we believe strongly that we need to spend more money in the classroom, less money in the district office. We also believe, and I think there's general agreement on this from folks across the political spectrum, that it costs more to educate certain children. It costs more to educate, for instance, students with special needs, and therefore there ought to be a base student cost, and there ought to be some additional monies provided for the number of special needs kids in each district. There ought to be additional monies provided for the number of students who are in poverty or economically distressed or at risk, depending on how you want to define that. And so I'm looking forward to the recommendations. I will tell you that the consultants have spent a large number of days and a lot of time in Mississippi. They've met with administrators, they've met with superintendents, they've met with teachers, they've met with students, they've met with parents, and I think what we hope they have determined and understand that there are different needs in different districts, and so we expect them to make a recommendation sometime relatively soon. We're also, by the way, looking at certain regulations that are currently in place, either in statute or by the State Department of Education, that are costly to school districts, that may not have any major impact on what's actually going on in the classroom. And if that's the case, we want to reduce the amount of burden and reduce the amount of resources that are being spent on those kind of things so that we can get more money spent on educating children.
I want to talk a little bit about transportation and roads and bridges. Last year, near the beginning, a lot of folks talked about that last year was supposed to be the year to fix the state's roads and bridges. The business community has been talking to lawmakers about this for years now. Do you foresee any kind of movement on that front this year?
Well, I think we'll have a lot of discussions about it. We had a lot of discussions about it last year during the legislative session. But what a lot of people forget is at the end of the day, for the Mississippi legislature to act, it takes a majority of legislators to actually go out and vote to act. And in this case, if you're dealing with revenues and potentially additional revenues, it actually takes 3/5 of members of the House and 3/5 of members of the Senate. And so what I believe is that we need to spend significantly more money on public infrastructure, roads and bridges, water and sewer, other infrastructure projects. I believe public infrastructure is a core function of government, and that we as a state ought to be spending more money on that core function of government, and we've got to try to find ways to do that.
You've been a supporter of user-based fees, user taxes. A great example of that is the gas tax. Would you be in favor of increasing the gas tax if it meant seeing more dollars go into roads and bridge repair here in the state?
Well, I think we need to spend more money on roads and bridges in Mississippi. I think there's a number of different ways to get at that. I will tell you that I think ignoring our infrastructure and our investment in roads and bridges is certainly not a conservative principle. And so I think you're going to continue to see me push for more dollars going specifically to maintaining the infrastructure that we have in place, maintaining our investment, and we'll continue to try to find ways to do just that.
Is there any social issue that you think needs to be addressed in the Senate this year?
Well, I don't know exactly what issues will be addressed in the Senate. I do know that last year we did pass 1523. We also passed a number of other bills. For instance, defunding Planned Parenthood in Mississippi. We think that's the right approach to take. It seems like we're certainly getting sued over a lot of these bills, and I spend more time talking to my lawyers than I spend talking to my senators, which is unfortunate. But I think that's what the vast majority of Mississippians They want us to do things on bills such as that, and we'll continue to do so when the opportunity presents itself.
What about the flag? Do you see any of those bills at least coming out of committee this year?
My recollection is there were a number of bills filed last year on both sides of the flag issue, and none of the bills came out of committee, neither the House or the Senate. And I wouldn't be shocked if they all met the same outcome this year.
And finally, kind of wrapping up, campaign finance reform. The speaker's talking about that being a major issue this year. Is that also going to be something that you focus on here in the Senate? Well,
we passed the bill twice last year and weren't able to get it across the finish line in the House of Representatives. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that done this year, and I believe that the Speaker is sincere in his efforts of trying to get that done, and we'll do anything we can to help him get it done.
The state of Mississippi will celebrate its bicentennial this year. What was known as the Mississippi Territory became the 20th state on December 10, 1817. House Speaker Philip Gunn talked about the bicentennial and the responsibility of lawmakers at the beginning of the session.
We are the caretakers and the stewards of our state that our forefathers started 200 years ago this year. This is indeed a great honor. We are indeed privileged to be standing here today as members of the legislature in the year that our state turns 200. And like our forefathers, we too have the privilege of shaping the future. Just like our forefathers, the task can appear daunting and we can grow apprehensive. But just like our forefathers, it is a great time of excitement and expectation. Let us be faithful stewards to the work to improve our state and make it the best place in the world in which to raise a family. Let us hope that when our state celebrates its 300-year anniversary, that they will look back on 2017 and say, that bunch in 2017 did a good job. And finally, let us be thankful to God. He is the one who has blessed our state. He is the one who has allowed this state to survive for 200 years. He is the one who has given us the privilege of serving here today. May we be faithful to serve so that when our job here is done, God will look at us and say, well done, good and faithful servants.
The legislature has $500,000 to share with communities across the state that want to celebrate the bicentennial. Grants of up to $10,000 are available. If your town or county might be interested, you can contact the Mississippi Humanities Council at mshumanities.org. Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Austin Barbour is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Barry Jones Law Firm and a former member of the Mississippi House of Representatives. Gentlemen, good to have you back with us on another season of At Issue. As we get underway with the session here, let's start with education. Nearly all of the folks we interviewed here for this program this evening talked about education. Austin, is it realistic for us to expect Ed Bill to have a recommendation before the legislature and that the legislature would act on it during this session?
Two good questions. I don't know the nuances of what Ed Bill is doing, who they've been talking with and working with. But yeah, I'm certain in the next week or two that they will probably have their recommendations of what should happen with an education formula to make sure that our students across the state are more than adequately funded. Can the legislature move on that this session? Look, I think that's going to be difficult. I do. They can, but I think this could be a 2-year process. I have not talked to one legislator, but as you know, the process is down there. This is a big issue. I think it is great that the leadership is undertaking this issue. I think it is smart what they're doing. They're looking at a way to fund student-based needs, whether you're a kid, a 6th grader in a rural county, Jackson, Mississippi, and obviously an urban area, gifted special needs. I think that is a really smart way to go about this, but I think it will be difficult for them to maybe pull that off this year. If they do, congratulations to them, but I think you should look at this as a 2-year project. If they get it done in year 1, that's great.
Because the Republican leadership did hire Ed Bill, this company, to come in and evaluate the funding formula like you mentioned, and we had expected a recommendation from Ed Bill before the session started. That's not happening just yet. And so that's the question: is what will they recommend, and what will then happen? And I guess, Brandon, if the legislature does not act on whatever recommendation they have this year, then what for education? Are we back to MAEP and more debate over how much we fund MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program?
The MAEP formula has been in effect for a long time. We've only funded it twice, so so we never have really given it its full day in court. But it's a good program, it's a good funding formula, and it's one that a majority of the state's citizens showed they supported a very short time ago. So I think this exercise is a little bit gratuitous. But Austin hit on something. We don't know, not only do we not know when the cake will be baked, but we don't really know what the ingredients are. Gray Tollison was quoted in the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal this week saying that he doesn't know what's in the proposal. He's not even sure what all ground it's going to cover, but that it'll be vetted. I think we've got a secrecy problem here. I mean, this is one of the biggest issues that the legislature takes on. You're right. Everybody on the shows in front of us mentioned it. And here we are not knowing exactly what they're going to take on. So I think that's problematic, and I think people have a right to be concerned. And no, I'm not waiting with bated breath for a New Jersey for-profit company to tell Mississippi how it ought to run its schools.
I think when you've heard the governor talk, the lieutenant governor talk, and the Speaker of the House talk, they've all said education is a big issue. They want to talk about the right way to fund education. $2.5 billion was funded to education last year. That's K through 12. That's not pre-K, as Senator Burton mentioned. That's obviously not IHL either. $2.5 billion, the most money has ever been spent on education in the history of Mississippi. Some people want to spend more. That's fine. I don't fault them. I think we need to figure out the right way to get whatever dollar amount we're going to spend. That number is not going to go down. I could not see it going down. We need to make sure we get those dollars into the classroom the best way we possibly can. I love this idea of how they want to try to spend this money, allocate this money. I trust the leadership on this. I think that what they've done in the past 4 to 8 years on education, whether it's charter schools, the third grade reading gate, which if people are watching who don't know what that is ensuring that kids know how to read before they go from the third to fourth grade, I think is what it is, Brandon. Teacher pay raises, dyslexia bills. I think there's a lot of things that this legislature has done. I think the biggest issue that they can claim credit under this leadership, I think, is on education. I really do, and I'm very excited to see that they're looking on the proper way to fund education and make sure it gets to the kids who need it and in the best way.
We have no idea what any of this is going to be, but one thing we do know, Ed Build said that, as Austin just mentioned, that the funding is not going to go down. The minimum dollar requirement is not going to change. That's a big problem. We've only funded the one we've got for 2 years over the 20-some-odd years it's been in effect. And so this Republican leadership is going to have to reckon with some more financing issues down the road, because it doesn't matter what the program is. We can agree that it does all these amazing things. And right now, let's be honest, even the chairman of education in the Senate cannot tell us what's included in it. So we don't know.
That's right, and that's why I think it's going to be a 2-year process.
But they're going to have to fund it. And if you don't fund it, then it really doesn't matter what you have. And so that's the question that Republican leadership is going to have to come to terms with, because they've never shown a propensity for funding an education program.
Well, I think what we need is a system that taxpayers, students, teachers, administrators, legislators, panelists can understand. I can't tell you how MAEP works. I bet there's not 10 people in the state of Mississippi who can tell you how MAEP works. So whatever system they come out with, and you're right, I bet Gray Tollison right now does not fully understand what's going to come from EdBuild, but he's a smart man, and he will understand it, because it will be a solution that we can all see in a very transparent way, and there not be any confusion whether you're running a school in Tunica County or Tishomingo County or in Taylorsville.
Well, we'll find out in due time. Let's move on to infrastructure now, another topic that was mentioned by the folks we interviewed for this program. At the end of the last year's session, we did not quite have an infrastructure plan, and everybody who drives on Mississippi roads agrees that we need one. What's going to happen with infrastructure this year? Can we get everybody together?
It doesn't sound very promising. It sounds like it's one of those issues where we all seem to say we need to get something done, but when we talk about the specific way we get there, there doesn't seem to be any agreement. When the last time that we had major wholesale infrastructure changes was during Vision 21. And that was whenever Democrats controlled both the House and Senate. This is the type of thing that's our bread and butter as Democrats. The infrastructure is something that we understand. It's something that we've been a part of implementing going back to the 40s. And so this is one of those things when you talk about why is it you're a Democrat, one of the things we believe in is a good road and bridge program. I think Republicans are going to have a tremendous challenge getting the votes out of their own party to do this. What Philip Gunn did yesterday was basically declare that we've got dysfunction junction. We have hired people to do these jobs that have made so many promises that they're not going to do certain things that would be helpful in their jobs, that they can't cast certain votes sight unseen. That's dysfunction. And so what I think they're going to try to do is to get a few of their guys or several more to take a walk while Democrats cover for them on what they want to do with a tax increase at the pump. And I hope that Democrats have the foresight to say no to that, because I don't think we should bail them out. This is a hard issue. Republican leaders are in a real box over it. I think they have a very simple solution. We could scale back the big tax break that we passed last year for strip mall folks and others. It would not be any tax footprint right now. It would cost $6.5 billion to be in the state coffers for the next 20 years. No one would pay a dime more in taxes, and we could fund those roads. But instead, I think we're going to try to ask truck drivers to pay more, and I think that's the wrong way to do it.
Truck drivers, come on. Anybody who, listen, there are several ways to do this. And I got to go back in time here from 30 seconds ago when my friend across the table here said, all elected officials make promises. That's what they do. I've run campaigns. You've run campaigns. You were a former elected official.
I apparently didn't make enough,
or didn't fulfill them. But
different topic, different night.
That's exactly right. They all make promises. Republicans, independents, Democrats, and sure, the voters are going to decide whether they came through or not. The infrastructure is a big issue. I mean, you've got Republican businessmen, you've got elected officials at the local level, mayors, supervisors, aldermen, you've got economic development folks at the state level, whether it's the MEC, whether it's people sitting in county offices who are trying to recruit business, and they want better roads. They want more 4-lane roads. They want more bridges. This is a big issue. I don't know what's going to happen here. This is one of these, and we always try to do this with the viewers across the state. We just try to talk very candidly, very plain spoken about these issues. There's 3 ways to tackle this for the legislature, and they know this. Raise taxes, which is the fuel tax, which is a user tax. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't think it's been done since 1987. 16 cents, 19 cents, whatever it is right now. So are you going to raise taxes on that? The only other 2 options are reassign where the money is in the current general fund. Are you going to take money away from education? Are you going to take money away from Medicaid? Are you going to take money away from mental health? Are you going to take money away from the highway patrol? And then the third option, obviously, is we have a new influx of revenues that's going to come into the state. We grab a vast majority of those new revenues that are going to come in and say, we're going to dedicate these to infrastructure. So those are the 3 options. It's very difficult. I know that the legislature will do something on it this year. There's a $375 million annual ask, I think, that the MEC has come forward. That is a tremendously large number that I don't think there's any possible way that could get met this year based on the 3 areas that we talked about.
The dark horse option is do nothing, which I think is where we'll be. And so we'll have a chance to talk about this around spring break and see where we are, but I don't see any solutions coming out of this bunch. I mean, we'll see. But I want to go back to this comment that Philip Gunn made that I referenced. I said it was dysfunction junction. But let's talk about that for a minute, because Austin makes a good point. All politicians do make promises. That's part of how you talk. That's part of how you sell yourself. But what he said yesterday was, we asked you to send us a particular type of what he called conservative legislator, and you sent it to us by the truckload. And then he says, and now that we've got them here, we can't ask them to tackle this problem. If you want to read it for what it is, that's what the statement says. And so I think we have to just be honest. I'm not sitting here trying to relitigate an election, but the truth is this overwhelming Republican majority at the legislature means some major options that have worked for states from time immemorial are off the table. And that's what we've declared. So when we hit big issues like this, education funding, things like roads and bridges, these are not things that these so-called supermajority conservative governments have ever accomplished, and I think they're going to have a hard time now.
I appreciate the candidness from the Speaker, because what he said is the truth. And I have 2 points to make here. You do have much more conservative Republican, particularly on a fiscal side of this, legislators, okay? Many of them young guys who really believe in this. And those guys are going to have a hard time if let's increase the gas tax. They will have a difficult time saying, yes, I can be for that. We cannot fault them for that. If that's how they believe, we cannot fault them for that. But on the flip side, you're going to have voters who say, we want you to tackle this issue. If you're not going to simply raise the gas tax, use those new revenues to repair the roads, improve the roads, build new roads and bridges, what is your other solution? You're right. So the Republicans are the dog that's caught this car, and we got to figure out a way to handle this. But I really do. I think you're right, but I appreciate the Speaker saying we have these very conservative, fiscally conservative legislators who don't believe in tax increases. And he's saying, I've got to figure out, along with the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, what is the proper solution for this.
I just wouldn't want a doctor who didn't believe in certain type of medical methodology to do surgery on me, but I guess that's where we are.
And we'll make that the last word tonight, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining us. And we thank you for joining us. We're out of time on At Issue. Don't forget, you can check out the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. Join us again next Friday night here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.